It is 9 o'clock. I know we'll have some people who enter late, but we're going to go ahead and get started. Uh, Jennifer's going to let me know if we don't see the PowerPoint on the screen, which happens occasionally.
I see the PowerPoint. If everybody else could give maybe a thumbs up as long as you're seeing the PowerPoint, that'd be great.
Rock on. So we are coming to you this bright, sunshiny Friday morning to talk TFI, Tiered Fidelity Inventory and Recognition. I am Tricia Schroed. I am the Director of Research and Evaluation for Midwest PBIS, and I will let the amazing Jennifer say good morning.
Too kind. I am Jennifer Norton. I'm an evaluation project coordinator, and I've been involved with recognition for a number of years. I'm sure many of you have received emails from me at some point. So good morning. Hello.
Jennifer is the person who makes it all work for us. So I'm excited to hang out with her this morning. So our objectives today are to, if necessary, understand how to give the TFI remotely, because many of us did not give the TFI last spring because we went home and we're busy trying to figure out how in the world we entered the school year last year in the middle of a pandemic. So we're going to talk about, if necessary, how to give that TFI remotely. We're going to talk about and compare and contrast the recognition process previous to this year and for this year only. Right now, this is about this year's recognition. Talk about, be prepared to articulate that recognition process to your school-based team or your district-based team, and prepare to implement the TFI and complete recognition. So we're going to ask that you have your cameras on if possible. We know that sometimes that's not possible depending on where our space is. We're going to have you on mute until the end. Part of that is because we're recording this presentation, and with 100 people, right, it can get a little messy if someone accidentally forgets and unmutes. And your question might be, you might think of a question in slide 3, but we answer it in slide 7, so we're going to hold questions to the end. So we're going to ask that you respect each other, obviously stay engaged, be committed, and we're excited to hang out with you this morning. So as I mentioned, we're going to have you on mute during the presentation because of the sheer number of participants that we have registered, and stuff happens, right? Melissa mentioned that her floors are being redone. So goodness knows she'd unmute and then a buzzsaw would go off or something, right? Or the dog or the doorbell. We're going to assume that you know about Zoom features because we've been Zooming now for almost a year, if that seems possible. But there are slides that help you with Zoom if necessary, or you could send a private chat to Jennifer or myself, and we'd make sure that you can navigate Zoom with us. In addition, and I'm going to stop the presentation for just a second, Jennifer is going to drop a link to a question and answer document. So before I hung out with Midwest PBIS, I was the Director of Curriculum and Instruction for School District U46. I know a couple of my peeps are going to hang with us today. And when we participated in large groups, we created kind of a back channel for questions. And that was important because Melissa might, I'm picking on Melissa and her floors today. Melissa might have a question, and if she's like me, if I don't write down my question, I get a little anxious because I might forget my question by the time questions happen, right? Sort of like I forget what I went to the grocery store for when I walk in the doors of the grocery store. So if that, having that question kind of impedes us from engaging, I want to jot it down just so I don't forget it. I also know that some of the questions that slide 3 or 5 or 7 generate might be answered in question 20. So then I have the ability to remove my question if it's not a question anymore. And it helps Jennifer and I be able to create FAQs for other people who either weren't able to be here, or if you forget what the response was later on. So she dropped this in the chat. I put a sample of what that might look like. I put my name, I put who I am and what organization I'm with. because we have some non-Illinoisers with us that do evaluation in other states and want to know more about our evaluation process. But we want to make sure those of you here from Illinois are able to get your questions answered first. So we're going to keep ourselves on mute. We're going to hold questions to the end. We're going to record this so people who weren't here can see it, and or you can see it later on. It'll be on our website. And we're going to put our questions here so that we have a record of them and we can document and create an FAQ from that. For those of you who are from out of state, I know Jennifer emailed you. We're going to answer Illinois questions and exhaust those questions and then stop the recording. And for those of you who are from other states who just have general overall evaluation questions, you'll be able to ask those at the end, because we don't want to confuse people that watch the webinar later. Why are we asking about Wisconsin, let's say? So that question document is there. If questions come up, and you can just put them in there and we will call on you in the order that they're entered. Let me stop and then restart my share, and then we'll jump into the learning today. Present. Okay, so one of the things that we're going to ask you to do, and some of you were in here early, so you already did this, is just rename with your organization so we know where you're from. That'll help us know, are you Illinois people and this is an Illinois specific question, or is this someone from Wisconsin or Kentucky, and we'll hold your questions to the end. I did this as an example of my own, Tricia Schroed, Midwest PBIS. So if you take a moment to rename yourself. So the reason that we give the tiered fidelity inventory, and those of you who've been at this for a really long time, right, we used to do other assessments, and those assessments were considered when we created the TFI, the tiered fidelity inventory. It helps you all as teams identify areas of strength that you need to continue and maybe even improve upon, and areas of need, sections that you still have work to do to help us in that continuous improvement process. And we give the TFI to assess our current reality. And so I put that question in the question document as a sample. There were people who are worried, like, what if our TFI is lower this year because we've been, gosh darn it, remote and hybrid and remote and in person, and we just don't have as many things in place as we did historically. That's okay. The TFI, as we're going to discuss as we get into the criteria for recognition this year, there's not an understanding that you're going to have to be at fidelity with TFI, but you do have to take the TFI. That is the gateway, if you will. And it's so important. We believe the TFI is important for you to understand what's going well and what areas of need you have. So any level, any badge, anything, you have to take the TFI, but be honest, right? You have to have good data to plan with. So it's very likely that even highly experienced, highly fidelitous implementers will have a different TFI score this year. Because I don't know if you guys noticed, but we've been in the middle of a pandemic and civil unrest and on and on and on, right? So you take the TFI to get a good pulse of where you are. It's completed by your teams. So your tier 1, your tier 2, your tier 3 teams. We always suggest that it's done with an external coach, right? That coach sometimes will keep us honest, right? If the coach asks us, like, do you have evidence of that? It makes us just pause and reflect. And it's in red because we have to have TFI to apply for any form of recognition. And it has to be submitted in your PBIS assessment account. So if you're doing this remotely, right, then you meet in Zoom or Google Meet or whatever tool you use to meet right now, because you don't have a lot of large groups and rooms in most areas, right? So set up a Zoom, set up a Google Meet, but you conduct the TFI together with your team, right? It can be opened by your local coordinator or by using that eval at midwestpbis.org. So if you've had some movement or you don't know how to get into it, please email us and we'll help. Otherwise, your local coordinator can open up the TFI. And again, each tiered team completes the section. So the tier 1 or the universal team completes tier 1. The tier 2 and the tier 3. I know in our smaller elementary schools in U46, we had a tier 2/3 team and they filled out both, right? they complete their section, but you try to do it in a time-bound way so that you don't use any data. So you're going to work with your external coach to help get that in place and to try to set, within a week so that you don't lose data. And again, your scores are based on your current situation, whatever that situation is, right? Even if we go back in person next fall, it's going to look different based on everything that we've been through. So you'll have better data to plan with if you use accurate representations of your current situation. For those of you who are relatively new, right, we have a couple different TFI reports that you're going to get. It's going to show data over time. And again, please, please, please give yourself grace. Even if you were at high levels of fidelity at each of the tiers last year, it's likely that you might see a dip this year. We're going to call it, right, the pandemic, impact, or whatever you want to nickname it in your neck of the woods. This is the overall report for tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. Again, if you've taken it previously, it'll show a nice bar graph. And then there's those sample TFI reports with subscale information for each of the tiers. These will be available for your teams to review as you plan. So after you take the TFI, and for those of you who've taken the TFI before, right, taking it virtually is not that much different than taking it around a table in a room. You come to consensus about what your score is, and you kind of push each other. If Melissa, both the Melissas, Miss Melissa Farley, yeah, hi Melissa, and my Melissa who's getting her floors done, if they were on a team together, and Melissa Farley wasn't so sure that they should rate themselves a 2 on one of the indicators, then they have discourse until they come to consensus about where that score is overall as a team, right? And it's so important with us as teams to be honest with ourselves, because the other adults in the building will call us out, right, if we're not being honest in representing where we're really at, especially this year now more than ever. And we use these data points to identify areas of improvement for the coming year. We love to use this data right before summer to do overall planning for the coming year about areas that we needed to tighten up our practice, or professional development that new staff or existing staff might need to better address these areas of the TFI. It's also strongly suggested that, right, that this is not the only data point you use to do that planning. So if you're in the state of Illinois, most of us take 5 Essentials, which is our climate data, right, taken by parents, students, and staff. Many of our districts take the SAS, which gives you the perception from other staff within the building. But then there are other metrics that your school or your district or your state might use, and those would paint a broader picture and help you triangulate, like, what is our current reality, not just using the TFI, but it's a place we have to start. So you take the TFI and you use that for planning. And those of you who want to apply for recognition this year is going to look very different. So we just want to acknowledge out loud that we greatly appreciate those of you who've been doing this work in the middle of this madness, right? And to recognize the fact that we've been facing a pandemic, civil unrest, along with the election and every other thing that's reverberated throughout our country this last year. We needed to reflect on how can we still have recognition so that you guys can get recognized for the hard work you've been doing in the midst of all this, without having it be so cumbersome that it doesn't make sense. So we've updated the process to highlight all the hard work that you've been doing since we left the building last March, because many of you have had to update your matrix, think about how your team meets differently, et cetera. And we wanted to honor the work that you've been doing in the midst of the pandemic. So the criteria that's the same as the old process is that you have to take the TFI and it has to be entered in PBIS apps, non-negotiable. That used to exist for the old process. It is absolutely necessary for the new process. And you have to submit an online recognition application. That's where the similarities are different for this year. So there are no bronze, silver, gold, platinum, which required levels of fidelity of implementation, because many of us have had to make such major shifts that doing that at the same time, trying to show implementation at a certain level just didn't seem appropriate right now. But we wanted to honor the fact that many of you have been doing a lot of hard work to consider your current context and update your structures to support that context. So instead of having bronze, silver, gold, and platinum, we have badges. Like, think back to the Girl Scout, Boy Scout, right? You implement practices and you get a badge. And so we're going to talk about what those badges are. The reminder that the badges don't accumulate, so you don't get a certain number of badges and get tier 1. Instead, the badges stand alone, and we'll talk about that when we get into that criteria. Again, there's no minimum score of fidelity. And for each of the badges that you want to apply for, you're going to have to submit a piece of evidence to show how you've been working on that badge. So when we get into the table that describes the badges, we'll give some very specific concrete examples. But if you apply for a badge, you have to have taken the TFI and submit a piece of evidence that aligns with that badge. And that piece of evidence needs to be 1 doc per badge. And we'll talk a little bit about that when Jennifer goes over how you enter the application. So here's the badges. At tier 1, we have the most badges, if you will, and that kind of makes sense, right? We have a tier 1 teaming and leadership badge, and you'll see that the badge description is given on the left of the table. Some possible modifications due to the current context are in the middle, and then some pieces of potential evidence are on the right. So we'll do one or two of these, but then I'm going to show you tier 2 and tier 3 just to, keep us moving. So that tier 1 teaming and leadership badge, to earn this badge, you have to show how has your team composition modified? Have you added extra people? Like, have you added someone who's super good at technology, because we've been trying to figure out how we do this virtually? Another piece of evidence might be that, hey, we've continued to meet every single month. Here's our agendas and meeting minutes linked in a document to show that even though we're in the middle of a pandemic, the tier 1 team met every single month this school year to address some of the other tier 1 supports that our school needed. So those are some examples of that tier 1 teaming and leadership badge. Let's look down third one, teaching behaviors. So to earn the teaching behaviors badge, you've continued to teach the behavior expectations. And many of you had to update those teaching expectations for remote learning or for hybrid learning. You created additional matrices that would be the learning expectations, but then you actively taught those expectations. So it might look like new cool tools or videos that you created, or the schedule for teaching those expectations. So each of these badges, there are 8 of them, they are listed on the left, are about you continuing to meet the demands, if you will, of the TFI at tier 1 through the very different lens of this school year. So 8 badges, they're listed on the left. That correlation to the TFI item and also some pieces of potential evidence are in this table. 8 badges at tier 1, 4 badges at tier 2 and tier 3. That makes sense, right? Like, we're still going to have a teaming and leadership badge. Did you have a tier 2 team that was still meeting this year? So if we're going to apply for the individual tier 2 teaming and leadership badge, again, they might submit evidence that they're still meeting on a monthly basis and, show agendas and meetings. For the tier 2 decision rules badge, right? You might document how you had to update the decision rules for check-in, check-out because you weren't in person and you weren't getting office discipline referrals like you used to. So you had a different criteria. You used teacher recommendation, you used parent recognition or recommendation, or student recommendation, or you had some other data rule that you had updated for entry into check-in, check-out due to the fact that you didn't have that oh, we get 3 ODRs and we go into check in, check out rule, right? So 4 badges at tier 2, teaming and leadership, decision rules, tier 2 intervention, tier 2 professional development and coaching, right? Those are the 4 badges available at tier 2. And again, we've linked information that shows how that correlates to TFI and what are some possible pieces of evidence. It doesn't have to be this, but we know people like examples of what this might look like. And then, as I said, also 3 badges at tier 3. Again, the same 3 badges or 4 badges, totally applicable within tier 3. Teaming and leadership, decision rules, tier 3 intervention, tier 3 professional development, and coaching. I'm going to turn it over to the great Jennifer Norton, and then we will handle questions after.
Let me see. I want to share my screen. I'm going to share the recognition application. So those of you who have done it in years past, we have had it online for the past, well, probably 8 years or so. And so we're going to continue that. It's set up in Google Forms this year. And we'll have all of this info on the website by this time next week. I did drop that in the chat, and that will include the link to the online application. And so at the beginning is just some information. You can read through that as you sit down. Remember that you do need to fill this out in one sitting. Just as years in the past, you can't start it and then come back to it 3 days later, unfortunately. So you will want to make sure that you've looked at the criteria that Trisha just went over, and make sure that you have all of your information. The one good thing about getting your TFI score into PBIS assessment is that we're not asking for you to enter your scores here anymore. I can just export those in bulk. And so we see your TFI scores, and we're able to look at them that way. So that is the really good thing about having all online systems. So I don't know if Trisha mentioned this, but the application is set up so that either each of your tier teams can apply for their own badges. So your tier 1 team can come to this application and they can fill out just the tier 1 badge portion of the application, submit it, and call it a day. And then your tier 2 team can come in and fill out an application for your tier 2 badges. Whereas in the past, we asked there was 1 application per school. So there is still the option to do 1 application per school. Many of you might have a coach at your school and you want them to fill out everything, tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. So there's a little bit of flexibility this year with this application. So, and I've put that right here. So I'm going to walk through the first few sections. It will collect your name, your email address, just like in years past, your coaching, your PBIS coaching role. Let me navigate to the next page. Okay, so your school name. I'm just putting some test info here to get us to the next part. Oh, this is a question that we do ask. We want to know how your students were learning this year. So we want you to check all that apply. Were they remote? Were they hybrid? Were they in person? Were they other? Were they everything? So go ahead and check as much as that are applicable to your situation. And then we do ask you to put your tiered Fidelity inventory date. So you might take the TFI multiple times throughout the year. Tell us what date you want us to look at. So like I said, I do export from PBIS assessment, and so I can see all of the scores statewide. And if I see that you have 2 or 3 results in there, but you want me to use the one from February versus November, let us know that here. So I'm just going to put that to get us through. Okay, now here is where the badges begin. The question is, what badge would you like to apply for first? At this point, you can, if it's your tier 3 team and they're only applying for tier 3, then they're going to click straight to tier 3 and proceed. Okay. If you are the coach at the school and you're going to be filling out just one application for everybody for all of the badges, then we want you to start with tier 1 and then work your way up to tier 3. Okay. And that's just so you don't have to keep clicking back or, starting at tier 3 and then going back to tier 1. Start with tier 1. That's our recommendation. Okay. And then, so I clicked tier 1. I'm going to start with tier 1. So it gives a little description at the top, 8 tier 1 badges. What tier 1 badge are you applying for? So here are the 8 that are listed. You can go in order or not for this one, whatever it works best for you. I'm just going to click the teaming and learning badge for the sake of an example. So I click that, and then it is going to ask you to upload evidence for this tier 1 badge. And Trisha, I don't think we talked a whole lot about that, and maybe we can share that right now. But from the technical side of things, I'm here to tell you that you are only allowed to upload 1 document per badge. So right now I've clicked the teaming and leadership badge. I'm going to give my evidence for that badge. So I would click add file. I will tell you that if you have a Google account, it's going to ask you to log into your Google account. If you don't have a Google account, hang with me. We'll get to the alternative there. I know some schools don't use Google, use Microsoft platforms. That's absolutely fine. We have an alternative, but this is going to be the first way we would like to get evidence. So I'm just going to grab a file from somewhere. Here we go. There is a limit to a single file that you can upload, and I believe it is 16 megabytes. I've put it in our FAQs, and I'll make sure that it's there if it's not there, but I'm pretty sure it's 16 megabytes. So this is pretty good. I have 4 megabytes here. I'm just going to click upload. We can see that it's processing. And great, we see that it's attached. Okay, if for some reason you get an error message during this time, probably means your file's too big. So we're gonna have to troubleshoot a little bit. And I can put some of those troubleshooting techniques in the FAQ documents. You can upload 1 file. As you can see, once I uploaded that 1 file, there's no other options or buttons to add another one. But it can be multiple pages. If you have like 3 different pieces of evidence for teaming and leadership that you want to provide us with, that's fine. Just put them all in one document though. Copy and paste it into a Word doc, save the Word doc, PDF it, whatever you need to do, okay? Now, for those of you who do not have Google accounts, you don't use Google at school, etc., what you will need to do is paste a link here to that resource for us. So say you share things through Dropbox and you have a Dropbox link to your evidence. Go ahead and drop that right here. Some people might have SharePoint. That's fine too. We just ask that you make sure you've given us permission to view that. So double check your permissions on anything you're sharing with us this way. Up here, when you actually attach the file, that's not a concern. But down here, if you don't have a Google account, that's where you're going to have to just double check your permissions, okay? That's probably the toughest part of the application, everybody. So take a deep breath if you've gotten through that.
Well, and Jennifer, to address the questions that coming in, you could create like a basic Google Doc and just have have it be a hyperdoc and then share that. So we're not asking for a huge Herculean lift.
No.
I would strongly suggest, especially those that use Google, you create a Google Doc. And I just got a question about teaming and leadership.
Mhm.
So you might just drop the links to your agendas right in that one document, click, 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 and then upload. So you
Absolutely.
don't have to merge stuff, etc.
No. Absolutely. Anything else? I wasn't watching the chat. I'm sorry, Trisha. Did anything else come in that we need to address right now about that?
We're using our handy dandy form. So
I
we just
know.
reiterated
With this,
that there's no Fidelity measure,
okay, we
and you can
come
apply
back.
for as many badges as you want, as long as you have evidence to upload for those badges.
Yes. Okay. So let's stick with the evidence. So I've uploaded my evidence for my first badge. And now it's going to ask me, would I like to apply for another tier 1 badge? If I want to, I click yes. It's going to bring me to the same similar looking page where then I just click which other tier 1 badge I want to apply for. If I want to go to my tier 2 badges now, I do. If I want to go to my tier 3 badges now, I do. Or maybe I'm a school and I only want to apply for that one tier 1 badge. That's absolutely fine as well. And you can say, I'm ready to submit this application, and we can go straight there. But let's go to a tier 3 badge quickly. I know that it's 9:30, so I think we're doing pretty well on time. So let's go to a tier 2 badge and just see what that looks like. At the top, it'll give you some general information about the tier 2 badges. There's 4 of them. What badge are you applying for? I'm going to click tier 2 decision rules. Same rules for the evidence. You can only upload one file for this badge. So make sure anything that's going to provide evidence for this tier 2 decision rules badge that you're applying for is in that document. And then you can add the file, or if you don't have a Google account, just drop us a link to the evidence in here. And then down at the bottom, would you like to apply for another tier 2 badge? Yes. Or take me to the tier 3 badges. So as you'll see, like I said, you want to do tier 1 first, tier 2 next, and then tier 3. Because once you get to this point, you don't want to have to go back to the tier 1s. Okay. So let's go to the tier 3 badge. Okay, tier 3 badge, very similar. I'm going to click tier 3 interventions. I'm going to add a file. I'm just grabbing anything here. Go here. Oh yeah, 50K, that's okay. Upload. Like I said, I think the limit is 16 megabytes. And I'll definitely put that in the FAQs. All right, so tier 3, would you like to apply for another? Yes, you could apply for more tier 3 badges at this point, or maybe you're ready to submit the application. That's where we're gonna go right now. So I'm ready to submit this application. Click next. At the top, it says you are nearing the end of this recognition application. So you do get a little warning that the end is near. And we have an additional information section like we always try to include. So before you submit, is there anything additional that you would like to share with us? You can type that in this space. And then once you hit submit, this year, it's a little different this year because you'll get a copy of your responses to the email address that you started the application with. And so that will be helpful for your record to make sure that, it was submitted. Oftentimes we get questions like, I don't know if it went through. Can I get a copy of my answers, etc. And so we're hoping that this cuts down on that worry for you all this year. And that's one of the benefits of using Google Forms. So I'm just going to click submit. And then once you click submit, you should see this. You have successfully submitted your school's application. Okay. And I just got my little Google notification that the answers are sitting in my inbox. Okay. So that's really the online application. If you have questions, throw them in our doc and we'll get to those during Q&A. But I will pass it back to Trisha to wrap things up insofar as the information we're presenting.
My apologies. I was updating the question doc as we went. So let me go back to sharing this FABU presentation, which I dropped in the link as well as linked in the Google Sheet that you guys are. I'm on my PowerPoint. I'm going to share my screen.
For those of you too, Trisha, I'm sorry that question came in chat earlier about sharing the PowerPoint, and I said that I would mail it out to anybody too afterward today. I can email all of these links after we're done here today, so you all can have them in an email to reference.
Yep. So you'll all have access to that shared question and answer document. It's open and available to you. I dropped the PowerPoint in there as well as in the chat. This will also be posted. This video, the PowerPoint, all these materials will be posted on our website as well, so you can go back and refer to them. A reminder about the timeline, February 5th, all of this documentation will be posted to the website. So the question and answer documents, the PowerPoint, the recording will all be on our Midwest recognition site by February 5th. In addition, the online recognition application will open on the 5th. We ask that if you want to be considered for early bird, that you submit your badges, your application for badges by April 9th. They're due, however, by May 7th. Please know that, again, I was in U46. We did this at the end of the year, and that's still okay, but you won't get notice until later in the summer. If you want notice according to the timeline, which is June 1st, the recognition application opens on February 5th. Early bird submission is considered April 9th. All recognition is due by May 7th if you want to be informed by June 1st, because that just gives us the opportunity to go through your materials and give you notice by June 1st. As always, if you're in a district that doesn't end till later and you take the TFI later, you can still apply. You just won't be informed at the same time as the June 1st. Those of you who submit for recognition are entered into the raffle, as always. And if you get into that early bird submission, you actually get 2 entries, right? So the early bird gets the worm. But February 5th, all these materials will be on the website and the application opens. Early bird submission is April 9th. All recognition is due May 7th if you want to hit that June 1st notification date. You'll be sent the email with a congratulatory letter, and you'll get your badge. Like, you don't have to sew it on a sash, but you'll get your badge to be able to put on your website and proudly display or print out. I know many of our schools printed those out and put them up at the front door. These are 2021 badges, right? We did this in response to the pandemic and what we've heard from you all about concerns about Fidelity, et cetera. And so what we can guarantee is that this is the process for 2021. But know that we'll consider feedback, et cetera, about how we go forward with recognition. But it's not like you're going to get the Tier 1 Teaming and Leadership badge, and that badge lasts forever. It is not a brownie button, that sash, right? It's going to say 2021, just like our old levels of recognition did. So I know that we've been capturing additional questions in the spreadsheet. I don't know, Jennifer, if anything else has come up that we need to address, but we are here to help. And we also know that we just threw a lot of information at you on a Friday morning. And so after you've been able to review the materials and gone back to your teams, you can certainly email us with additional questions. There's the fabulous Jennifer and I. You can send us that email at eval Midwest PBIS. So let's say Monica goes back to her teams and she thinks she has this, like, she's got the PowerPoint, she's got the question and answer document, and then one of her teams comes up with the question, she kind of gets stuck. just send us an email. And we're going to have a technical assistance breakout. So those of you who know about our Coaches Network meetings that happen once per month, the February meeting is focused, the content is focused on Tier 3, but there's going to be a second half of that meeting. They're held from 2 to 4. So roughly 3:15 until 4, we're going to have breakout sessions with technical assistance. And one of those technical assistance sessions will be about recognition. I apologize, I'm getting a unstable internet message, so I'm going to turn off my video real quick. Nothing like wait until the middle of a webinar. But again, if you want additional support, come to that Coaches Network meeting. It's actually the registration is linked in this PowerPoint, or you could go to the Coaches Network section of the website and register. And that way it'll be another opportunity once you've kind of had some time to sit with this information. If additional questions come up, or you start to fill out an application and you get stuck, you can come in on that February 8th meeting and get your questions answered in real time. I'm going to check with Jennifer real quick to see if additional questions came in that we need to respond to.
You know, there is one question that we should probably address before we end here, but it's about the early bird deadline. And so for the past few years, we have had this early bird deadline, and so the question is, what are the benefits to that? Really, it's just, yes, you get entered into the raffle for the gift card, which is cool and all, but really we're just guaranteeing that you are included in the recognized schools list before that June 1st date. And so early bird, nobody's, penalized if you don't submit something by the early bird. So don't worry about that. It's really just something fun that we've been trying to do so that people can check recognition off of their to-do list before those end of the school year activities begin. And so if you're ready to submit by that early bird date, then we encourage you to, but don't worry about it if you can't do it. Okay. And I will put that comment in the answers doc, but I just wanted to address it before we stopped here. There's a lot of great questions in the doc, so please keep adding those. I know Trisha already added a few answers. I tried to get in there and do a few as well. But yeah, I think Trisha, how do you want to do this? I know it's about 9:45 right now.
Sure. So I will go into the document and just make sure we walk through those questions so you guys feel confident that you had your question responded to. So as a reminder, there's no Fidelity required for TFI because there is no bronze, silver, etc. You're submitting individual evidence for individual badges, and it's not like 6 Tier 1 badges equals Tier 1 implementation. They are individual badges. There was some great questions about, how big is the limit. We haven't yet submitted a piece of evidence because we've been practicing with that form. We haven't yet submitted one that maxed out the size of the file. It's a really sizable chunk. And especially if you're using something like a HyperDoc in Google, you're not going to hit that max.
Also, I did say this in the answers, but I'll find a general resource and drop it in the FAQs on our website for this. So it'll kind of give you an idea of like, what does 5 megabytes look like versus 16 megabytes? And I'll add some troubleshooting tips in there too, like PDFing a document oftentimes condenses the size. So if you are giving us something that has a lot of colorful pictures, it might be a really giant file, but if you PDF it and condense it, it will reduce the file size. So there's little tips and tricks like that I'll drop in the FAQs next week so that you can utilize that, okay?
And I will say, Priscilla, there is not a rubric for each badge. We revamped our recognition process to recognize the very real realities that we're dealing with this year. And so we want to see effort. This is about what have you done to try to still implement these practices? How creative and innovative have you gotten? We're not going to have, we're not going to develop a rubric for this year. We're going to take feedback on how this process went. But we do want to see, that's why we're asking for pieces of evidence. I had a great question from Denise. It would be helpful if you had a couple agendas, a couple sign-ins. If you feel like you need to, blur out people's names, please do that for your own comfort. You don't have to go through that extra effort, though. You could just give the links to the actual document. Please know that when you share these pieces of evidence, it is, and I'll just let you know that if there are names on them, we would strike them out, but we might use them. We've used, if you remember from presentations that we've given this year, we totally gave credit to Carl Sandburg, who gave us the original, like, updated remote matrix. So if you have some amazing, innovative piece that you've submitted for, let's say, behavioral expectations in hybrid fashion, when you submit these, you know that they might appear on the website or be used. But again, if they have confidential information like a name, we would not feature the name. We're not going to post, let's see, where were you from, Denise? We're not going to post Elmhurst agendas with people's names published. I had some great questions. If one coach is turning in the form, that one coach with that email will get that copy. And so you might need to just forward the copy. You might need to ask internally for them to forward information to you. Jennifer, do you want to jump in? Because I know Tracy asked a question.
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's really up for you to decide as your team. Whatever email addresses you enter on your applications, that's who we're going to communicate with. So the congratulatory emails that go out when everything is said and done, we're going to use all of the emails that are submitted. And I don't know if I showed this enough when I walked through the application, but I think I give room for at least 2 coaches to be emailed, and I might have maxed it out at 3 or 4, but yeah, there's definitely room to add additional coaches, and anybody's email who is included will be communicated with. There was another question that, so if you wanted to just continue to use a single email, like if you have a tier 1 middle school that you use, that's fine. Whatever email that you all want to use, that's up to you. But if individually, if all of you use your own emails, then yeah, the results that come from Google Forms, it's just going to go to that one person. I'm taking a look at some of the other questions here. These are really great questions, and I will probably add most of them to our frequently asked questions document so that everybody can look at them.
Don't forget, this is not the only opportunity to get support related to TFI or the recognition process. Again, everything will be posted on the website by February 5th, which I don't know if you guys know, but like that's next week, for goodness sakes. Doesn't feel like it should be February, but it is, everyone. And then that February 8th coaches meeting, even if you don't regularly attend, if you wanted to register and come to the second half for technical assistance to have some live question and answers, we would love to have you. Just go ahead and use the PowerPoint or the website to register and bring your questions. You could also bring additional members of your team. So there's a great question about data decision. If you have changed your data decision rules, you don't have to show student data. Many of you use the data decision rules on the form that monitors tier 2 implementation, right? You could just supply that updated sheet. Let me see while we're still talking if I can find that sheet quickly. But you know that where you have the sheet that shows check in, check out, SAGE, mentoring, whatever your tier 2 interventions are, and at the bottom you have your data rules for entry, on track and exit. If you've updated those because you no longer have large numbers of office discipline referrals, you don't have to show any student data. You just show updated data rules.
There was a question in the question document, and I don't know if someone deleted it, but it was an interesting question to me. And I know that a lot of people are curious about the badges. And so as in years past, there were decals, and we had those on the website for download. So once you got your congratulatory email that you were recognized as a silver school, for example, you could download that silver decal from the website and then do whatever you want with it. You could stick it on your school's website. Some people printed them out and got banners made, etc. And so the badges will be the same. We will have those as downloadable files on our website closer to the recognized school publication date. Insofar as like printing those, as we've said in the past, that's up to you and your school, how you get those printed, what you want to do with those. We're really just providing the files for you. Okay. And
Dropped a link. Oh, sorry.
oh no, I know everybody's probably curious about what the badges are going to look like. And we had like a very drafty example in the PowerPoint for a tier 1 teaming and leadership. And so, yeah, we're hoping that they are a nice change from the decals for bronze, silver, gold, platinum.
And I just copied a link. So when you ask the question about data decision rules, right, again, you don't have to share student data. What it might look like is the tracking tool that you use to track the interventions. That's where I would show that I've changed my data decision rules. See at the bottom where it says, you know, check in, check out, social and academic, et cetera. Like, what are your data decision rules for entry to check in, check out? Because in my elementary schools, it used to be 3 ODRs. Well, we don't have a lot of office discipline referrals right now. So how did you update the decision rules to get into check in, check out? Are you still at 80% responding, et cetera, et cetera? So this is a way that you could show those data decision rules. And I popped the link on the webpage. Again, it was amazing to see your bright, shiny, smiling faces this morning. We hope that this was helpful. All of these materials will be on the webpage by February 5th. You could sign up for the Coaches Network meeting on February 8th to get additional technical assistance. If you start working through this process and had additional questions, you can always, always, always email eval@Midwest PBIS with additional questions or concerns. If we don't have any additional burning questions, we are going to stop recording.